There I am. Grace, peace, and welcome to Podcast of the Wills, a podcast that treats Star Wars like a sacred text. It's Sunday night, and it's time to hang out and talk about Star Wars. I was so excited, I forgot to hit the button where I actually put myself into the feed. So you got just a quick minute of that beautiful starry background. If I haven't met you before, my name is Nick. I'm one of the hosts of Podcast of the Wills. It is an honor to be with you tonight. I know we've already got friends hanging out in the live chat, and I'm excited to have y'all here. I'm excited to talk to my guest tonight. Normally we do news if we have any news up front. Not only do we not have news, we have something 100 times better than news. If you've been listening to Podcast of the Wills for any period of time, if you're one of our audio listeners from a long time back, you know that this show is not just me. This show is also my good friend, Steve Renaud. Steve is one of the founders of Podcast of the Wills. And I got a message just a couple of short minutes ago, right before we went live. And it said, "Hey, did you pre-record tonight's show?" The answer is no, I didn't. And you know what that means? That means I get Steve Renaud.
Hey, everyone.
The other half of Podcast of the Wills. He had just a few minutes to check in. What is up, brother? How are you?
Life is good. Let's see. We had Easter. For those of you who don't remember, because I've been gone for a while, I'm an ordained minister. We had Easter, finished my second semester at Duke, and new baby's coming a week from tomorrow. So I'm in like this little sweet spot. And I was like, I'm just going to pop in and say hello because I've missed being a part of this. Absolutely.
Well, we're so thrilled that you are here tonight and that you had a minute to check in with us. New baby on the way. That's super exciting. You said a week from tomorrow?
Week from tomorrow. So
anyway, just in time with exams done.
A new Padawan. So
another new Padawan, another new Little Wills Pod adherent. Well, let's do this real quick. Before we get you out of here, I know you've got another young Padawan to get to bed. I wish you could stay and hang out tonight, but we'll have you back in here soon where we can stay the whole time. Tell us real quick. We know that we've got Obi-Wan in production. We've gotten some little tidbits of news coming up here or have heard over the last couple of weeks. What is one piece of Star Wars news you have heard recently that has really been exciting for you?
I'm liking that with everything that's going on, this stuff is actually getting made. That was a really kind of scary thing with 2020. It doesn't sound like things have gotten pushed back all that too much. And I'm making my way through books. And so I've been reading the new kind of old, the High Republic books.
High Republic. That's awesome.
And those are really kind of fun. So I got to get a good chunk into one the other day. And so Bad Batch is looking much better than I really thought it was going to be. I mean, I thought it's just going to be kind of a continuation, but it looks like it's going to be its own thing, which is really cool. Obi-Wan. My gosh, it's fun again.
It's very fun. Several people.
I thought I would miss movies. I'm not missing movies. So, and
absolutely.
So I'm excited to see what Disney's rolling out. I keep on like, I'm going to get rid of my Disney Plus. I'm going to get rid of my Disney Plus, and then they do things like WandaVision, Mandalorian, Falcon and Winter Soldier, and I'm like, good gosh, stop doing that, guys.
That's how they get you. They just keep cranking them out. And
we're going to say good night. Can you say good night?
Hey, Grantham.
Good night.
So thank you so much, Steve. It's so good to see you.
Talk to y'all later.
All right. See you, buddy. Wow. That was so fun. That was totally unexpected. Literally, I was talking to my guest. We were chatting, and all of a sudden my phone dinged. And I was actually talking about Steve to my guest. And I said, yeah, we were doing this and explaining the podcast. And I got a text from Steve that said, hey, have you pre-recorded the show this week? And I said, no, are you going to join me? And I got him in, and I'm so excited. Y'all got a chance to see Steve for just a minute. We're excited for him to continue finishing up his doctoral program, and especially to have a new baby coming a week from tomorrow. So we wish Steve and Olivia nothing but the best with that. And what a great way to kick off the show. So we're going to keep the fun rolling. It's time to bring in my guest. My guest tonight is a gentleman named Michael Nipp. Michael is one of the co-hosts of a podcast called the Deucecast Movie Show. And if you're not already listening to the Deucecast, I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, you need to go find it. You need to subscribe. They talk about movies. They do fun categories. They'll look back on decades of movies. There's so much more that they do, and I'm going to let Michael talk about that. Michael, there are a couple things that I wanted to highlight as I get him in here. Michael is a fellow resident of Alabama. So for me, this is a big deal. I've now had 2 fellow Alabama podcasters on as I continue to add this like niche collection of guests that I've had. So Alabama podcasters, I'm always excited to have people on from my home state. And also when I reached out to Michael and I asked him to come on the show, he immediately was excited to come on. And what he told me was he's been hosting a podcast for 10 years and he's never been on a Star Wars podcast. And of course, automatically I was like, well, we can fix that right away. But, you know, as we know, and of course, I'm pretty single focused when it comes to my podcast and Star Wars. I listen to a lot of different other podcasts, but it was just that fun thing. I was like, I can't wait to be the one to give him an opportunity to come hang out and talk about Star Wars. So without further ado, I want to bring in my friend, Michael Nipp.
Hey, what's up, Nick? How's it going, buddy?
Dude, you're here. We're ready.
Yes.
We're going to talk Star Wars.
I'm always excited to talk Star Wars. I mean, any excuse. I'm in a room literally surrounded by Star Wars memorabilia, action figures. I've got a huge R2-D2 cooler from like the Phantom Menace days, I think.
Oh, yeah.
You would like throw all the, I think it was Pepsi. You would throw all the Pepsis in them. I picked that up during the pandemic, so that was a fun pickup. I'm
excellent.
Thrilled to talk about Star Wars. And you know, and I want to preface, I have never been like a guest on a Star Wars podcast.
Sure.
I dabbled a little bit in Star Wars podcasting. There was a podcast that I had for a couple of years, and maybe we'll come back at some point, called Card Trader Illuminati. I want to upfront apologize for my friend Rhett that is in your chat right now.
That's right. I see it.
He is going to destroy your chat. So just be
That's okay. We like it when it's exciting. We like it when it's exciting in the chat.
I'm going to openly apologize in advance for him. He especially likes to destroy chats for people he has no idea who they are. So that's going to be fun for everybody in your chat today.
Well, good. Rhett, welcome to the show.
Yeah. So Card Trader Illuminati. So when the Star Wars Topps Card Trader digital app started, we dabbled in that. It was Rhett, myself, and my really good friend Tommy doing a Star Wars Card Trader podcast, but then it was a lot of other things.
Absolutely. As most of them turn out to be. This one started out somewhere else and now we're here.
So
that's really fun.
I've taken a step back from that, but there's a lot of people that would love for that to come back, just because mostly the non-Star Wars content, but
right.
We'll see what happens with that.
Well, and that's actually a really appropriate that was the show that you had. We usually have some friends, Frank and Amy, who also live in Alabama. They live in Huntsville, who usually tune in on Sunday nights, and they are big card collectors, both physical and the Card Trader app.
Cool.
And I know you checked out some of my previous shows, but it was 2 or 3 weeks ago. I had on Brandon St. Bernard, who is the senior digital artist working on the Star Wars Card Trader app.
Nice.
Was my guest, and I fiddle with the app some, and really enjoy it. And so when he agreed to come on, I was like, holy cow, this is another person who works in Star Wars, and like that's their job. And I got really excited to not only do that, but be able to, you know, have on somebody that, again, their job is Star Wars. Like that's the dream right there.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I love that.
So it was a lot of fun. He was a great guest, and it was neat to hear about, you know, the work he does as an artist, and you know how that relates to his role with the Card Trader app. Well, we have some important business to get to at the top of the show.
Yes.
And I mean, it's not a Sunday night. It's not a Sunday night with Podcast of the Wheels if we're not making a drink.
That's right.
I keep saying, you know, I'm trying very hard to become the Stanley Tucci of Star Wars podcasts, making cocktails in my really finely appointed corner of my garage, not a big fancy kitchen like he has. And so the tradition continues, and I have a cocktail queued up that is made in honor of you, sir, my guest. I need to get the screen share going on. Let me see if I can do this without, you know, derailing everything. Technology is so lovely. Here we go. We have, for everybody tuned in at home,
I love this.
I gotta get this out of the way for just a minute. We are calling this Michael's Movie Magic.
I love this.
So I'm gonna make mine right here. In fact, I need to change up the screen a minute.
Awesome.
Let's see. All right. Well, I don't want to do that. That gets you out of here. So we'll do it this way.
And I made mine already. So
yours is
I'm
ready.
already enjoying mine, and it is glorious.
Well, what we have is we've got some cranberry juice, about 3 ounces of cranberry juice. We'll call that 3 ounces. We have some ginger beer. I have Owen's Craft Mixers. I believe it was on sale at Publix. So
nice.
Another 3 ounces of that. We'll call that 3. It's about half. It's about half of this pint glass. And then it says 6 ounces of wheat beer. I didn't have any wheat beer on hand, but what I had some Elysian Space Dust. If my friend Jackson is in the chat, Jackson knows that's left over from the stream that we were on Friday together.
Nice.
So we're gonna.
I've got a shout out to local brewery here, Avondale Brewery, Spring Street Saison is what I used, and it was glorious.
It is a fantastic beer. And then what it says on the instructions is you could put some lemon juice, a wedge of lemon. I don't have either of those, but I'm going to throw a little bit of lime juice in here just for fun.
Getting fancy.
So it's almost like I went to Sonic, but they included some beer in my cherry limeade. So cheers to you, sir.
Cheers
to having fun tonight.
And they're almost the same color.
That's right. Mine's a little more pink, which means I was probably heavy-handed on the cranberry. But that's okay, too.
Oh, that's good stuff. Hey, at home, if you're not making that right now, you're doing it wrong.
That's right. You're totally missing out. So we've got the drink out of the way. We've got the important stuff.
Yep.
Here's what I want to start with, and this is where I usually start with my guests. Tell us about your Star Wars origin story, how you kind of, when you first saw Star Wars, growing up with it, that kind of thing.
So, I grew up overseas quite a bit. My dad worked a lot overseas in very strange places. Like I was in Indonesia for a little while. My dad had a job there, so we were there. So really not many movie theaters around. So as far as how I came to Star Wars, it was VHS. You know, we would get the videotapes, mailed in from America a lot of times because Indonesia, you can't get in. At that time in the early 80s, you could not get, you could not, there weren't movie theaters there. You couldn't get movies. So anything we would have shipped in, or we, had some like satellite access every once in a while if we were lucky, but mostly it was the VHS. So I distinctly remember watching the VHS. There was one that came out like in 82, 83. It was, A New Hope. And that's kind of how I came into it. And it was just a movie, I think, when you're that age, that you automatically fall in love with. And it's really interesting because movies now are so fast paced, and kids today like really want fast paced stuff. Back then, I mean, we thought that was a fast paced movie. I mean, and it was just absolutely amazing, everything on screen. And I just fell in love with the characters. Obviously, the original trilogy is near and dear to my heart. I have a lot of the Kenner figures. I have the original Star Wars 1977 poster, the actual one sheet.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I mean, and oddly, that's not one of the things we're going to be talking about tonight. But but it's just one of those things that you just fall in love with the idea of a kid that came from nothing, finding adventure in an unexpected way, a way that he never expected experiencing in his life. He thought he was going to be on Tatooine forever, right? I mean, and I think a lot of us can relate to that in a way. We think we're going to be in the same city that we're born in forever. We never think we're going to get to leave the little town that we're in. And I was really, really blessed to, because of my dad's work, to travel all over the world with him really young, and a little bit when I was older. But I mean, most of that was when we were very young. I mean, we did end up, living in Portland, Oregon for quite a while. And then eventually found our way to Birmingham. But
that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things. And then, as we're going to be talking about some of this stuff, I mean, I'll share some other like stories about, I mean, the thing that I find with Star Wars is it fits into this niche of family, friends, and community. I mean, for whatever reason, and even all my friends, and we're all a bunch of jerks to each other, but one thing that we love for the most part, Rhett probably will say some of the stuff that he doesn't love about Star Wars, but for the most part, we love Star Wars. And it's something that we have common ground talking about Star Wars and experiencing going to the movies together. I've even been to some of the Celebration conventions with some of these
Sweet.
guys. And then my dad always would come with me to these conventions. And so that was sort of like the family aspect of it. And I mean, the community that, especially last year, I think that without the online Star Wars community, I think a lot of people probably would have been in a dark place.
Without
I think
question.
the online Star Wars community, at least the good part of the Star Wars community, helped a lot of people through tough times. There's always going to be bad eggs out there, but I mean, if you find your group of people that you hang out with online, you don't know these people in real life, but you have fun with them in chats like this, or participating in that way. I mean, and so I just love that aspect of Star Wars. So
you're absolutely right, and that's something that I've talked about a lot. Not only since starting the live stream, but in individual conversations, in just over the course of this last year. Being able to connect in this way, watching other live streams that I watch, being able to have, I told you before the show, a lot of times the live chat becomes its own separate show while this show is going on.
Yeah.
Which is great because I get excited to look forward to and see my friends over when I go watch the Bombad Cast, or when I go watch Holochronicles, or when I watch Around the Galaxy. And we've all become this group of friends that not only do I look forward to talking to them and making jokes and connecting with somebody like you, connecting with Mark Marquis, who lives in Birmingham from Clashing Sabers podcast, or Frank and Amy, who live in Huntsville, because not only are there those Alabama connections and this podcast community connection, but if I can do everything in my power to end up at Celebration in Anaheim next year,
yeah,
I'm going to give out hugs like it's my job for these people that over the course of the last year I've connected with, and we've connected because of this movie about space wizards that, like you, I've had it my entire life. I've grown up with it. I've been obsessed with it in various levels at various times of my life, but it's created this community of people that I can't wait to hang out with Scotty and run around Celebration and watch him, react to things and get excited. And I can't wait to run into Pete, all these people that are a part of, my online family, as we call it. And when your friends become your family on certain levels, it's really powerful. It's really fun. And it adds to exactly what you said, the core of what Star Wars is. It's friends, it's family, and it's community. And that has been such a big deal, not only over the course of this last year, but I look forward to that continuing as we go forward and as the world hopefully returns to some kind of, normal. It's a big deal. So that's so great that you grew up, with that. And then again, in a similar vein to me. So you also, you were familiar with what we call the dark times. Did you spend those times with the Legends books, the old
I did,
EU?
Yeah. Oh, sure. I mean, Heir to the Empire. I mean, everybody read that Thrawn trilogy. I mean, that was huge. I mean, that was
going to be our sequel trilogy.
Yeah. I mean, that was just, I think that Timothy Zahn is one of the best Star Wars authors. I mean, he knows Star Wars in a way that he just continued to capture that magic that Luke has created. So, I mean, it's just, and, big shout out to Rick McCallum. I've got Lucas and Rick McCallum here on my t-shirt. They're my two dads. I love them both. So Rick McCallum.
I hope Scotty's still watching. If you haven't watched
silent partner.
Absolutely. If you haven't watched the Bombad Cast yet, you need to go find Scotty and Jerry, because they are hardcore Rick McCallum guys, and
I love
you'll be right at home with them.
That's awesome.
So you have Star Wars, and that's a fantastic part of obviously what brings you here tonight. It's something that you love.
Yeah.
But you also do something that I am borderline obsessed with. There's like 5 other podcasts that I wish I could either start or do or whatever.
Right.
Having a wife and 4 kids and, doing this on a weekly basis, I dare not try to bring in another one and cross the streams.
Yeah.
But you host a movie podcast, and you've been hosting that movie podcast for 10 years. Talk about the Deuce Cast. Talk about, getting that started and what you guys do.
Yeah, so I mean, we can talk about that, of course. I mean, movies in general. I mean, I think I found my love for movies because of guys like, Lucas, Spielberg, Coppola, all of those type of guys that kind of all went to school together and were buddies, while they were going to USC. And I just kind of fell in love when I was in high school, probably like my freshman, sophomore year in high school when I was still over in Portland. I really thought, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to do something in the movie industry. God had different ideas for me, and my dad got a job over here in Birmingham, so we moved, and that wasn't necessarily the plan there, but my love for movies in general never changed. And it's something that when I found myself living with these 4 dudes in an apartment that we called the Deuce. There's a long story about why it's called the Deuce. It's not what you think, but it's exactly, my really good friend and co-host of the Deucecast movie show, David Dollar, he came up with the name, from when he was in college, but he sort of took that into our apartment. It was the second apartment that we lived in together, so that's kind of the Deuce. And then all these guys that I would really jump in front of a car for probably and push them out of the way if I had to. These guys that I've kind of been friends with for years, we decided when we all started getting married off that we needed to figure out a way to still hang out. So Absolutely. It was really born from that. It was more born from, hey, we need an excuse to hang out. We know we all love movies. This podcasting thing's really popular. Let's go ahead and do it. So out of the necessity of having an excuse to hang out, we did that. And we did it for years, probably like 9 of the 10 years, just about, we were in the same room together doing it.
Okay.
So that was an advantage that we had to a lot of podcasts, because there's obviously a different dynamic when you're in the same room with your friend.
Without question.
And it was so much fun. Then the pandemic hits, and then we have to figure out this whole Zoom StreamYard world, which is something we had never done. I mean, So it was very new to us to have to do it in this way, where we were going to have to edit the podcast. Before, we wouldn't edit. We would just record the thing and throw it out there. And it made life so much easier.
Do it live.
We're going to get back to that at some point. But I mean, for right now, we're having to do it this way. But yeah, I mean, any and every movies. I mean, there's certain genres that I'm not a huge fan of. Like, I have found myself over the years liking the horror genre more than I thought I would, because we did something every October called Mike-tober, where the guys assigned me a horror movie, and I hadn't seen any of the classics at all. Like, I had not seen any of the really old popular stuff. And so through that, I've started to really respect that genre a lot more than I did before. So that's the cool thing about hosting a movie podcast, is you get to find all these movies that you never really thought you would ever have time to watch. And this year, for whatever dumb reason, I have made the decision that I'm going to watch 365 movies this year. New to me movies. So I'm not, this is not even counting like rewatches. These have to be like new movies to me. And I've made that commitment, and I should have never done that. It's very time consuming.
No doubt. Well, and in listening to your show, and I make full, public knowledge of, I haven't always been a subscriber to the Deucecast. As I told you before we got online, I don't know how I originally came across you on Twitter, but I did. And I saw right away, he's a podcaster and he's in Alabama. And so I was like, following that guy, like, that was all the criteria I needed. Awesome. But as I continued to follow you, I like the things that you said. I was like, this feels like one of my guys. And so as I was, working on guests for this show and reached out to you, I had listened to a couple of episodes because I had to figure out, okay, he's a podcaster, but what does he do? But I hadn't listened to a ton of it. And so in the last week or two, knowing you were coming on, I thought I want to do some research. And so I went and downloaded, I think, the 3 most recent episodes. And then I went back and found a couple of older things, looking for Star Wars stuff, some of that. And what I really love is y'all do, and I'm sure this is just scratching the surface, but like you talked about the 365 movies thing.
Yeah.
There was a top 200 something list that you were working your way through.
Yeah, we do all kinds of crazy stuff.
And then, and I like the idea also of assigning movies to each other. Whether it's knowing, because I'm like you, like horror is not my thing. As a general rule, like to me, horror is dumb because I know it's fake. Like I just don't care. Like I'm not invested in it. It doesn't. But then I see something like, Get Out, which is maybe more suspense than horror.
Yeah.
And, of course, I love the classics. I love The Shining. I love, some of those kinds of movies, which may not even, again, necessarily be horror movies on the vein of like Friday the 13th or Halloween or Nightmare on Elm Street, something like that. But I love the idea of assigning movies because, hey, Michael's not really into horror, so we're going to give him assignments, or, Dr. Earl's not into whatever, so he gets something else. Or, like you do that, and because you're friends and because I'm going to make him work for it a little bit. It's not just, hey, he gets to go watch Raiders because everybody loves Raiders.
Exactly.
So I like that because not only does it help you expand your horizons, and like you said, you've kind of come around to horror on certain levels, but it also creates things for you to talk about. And as a content creator, I'm always looking for what is the next angle, what is, no and you've been doing it for 10 years. So you could have hit a wall at any time. That's amazing.
Oh, we hit the wall about year 5 and we just pushed through it. We just kept going.
Well, and that's what you have to do. I truly believe that.
Yeah.
In one of the recent shows, and I wanted to ask you about this.
Okay.
One of the recent shows that you guys did, it may actually be the most recent one. You guys talked about the last Blockbuster documentary.
Oh yeah,
and I just watched that last night, and it was great. And like I love Paul Scheer, so I was excited to see him, and to have that connection, seeing that. I was so pleasantly surprised with the number of Star Wars Easter eggs, not the least of which is James Arnold Taylor, like 3 or 4 different times.
Yeah.
And the I can't remember which guy it was, but the guy that had all the Star Wars posters behind him, and he had that Revenge of the Jedi poster right in the middle.
That dude, you always think that all the Star Wars fans, like the mega fans.
And he's a band. He's a music somebody, isn't he?
Secret Garden, and
yes.
That which was a horrible band from the 90s. Sorry if you like Secret Garden, but I mean it was a horrible band from the 90s. And the dude apparently is obsessed with Star Wars, and I want to know more about that guy. Like
yes,
Rick Springfield, huge Star Wars fan, has like
a ridiculous collection,
huge collection.
Yes,
and you always hear about that guy, and I had never heard that the guy from Secret Garden was a Star Wars fan, so that really intrigued me. You need to get him on this show.
That's right. I need to work on. And right there, dead front and center of that shot that he was in, was a clearly an original Revenge of the Jedi movie theater poster before everything changed.
And that's how that's the hint that it's next level. Like when when a dude has the Revenge of the Jedi poster, the dude's next level.
Yeah, he passes the shibboleth test, as it were.
Exactly.
That's exactly what that is. So, and again, and that's so up my alley. And like I said, the other reason I know, and I have become a subscriber just in this week of doing this research, is I texted this to you and I told it to you again earlier. I listen to your show and I find myself participating and commenting in the show literally out loud in my car as you're talking about stuff, and you're trying to come up with off the top of your head, what was the other thing that Joe Morton was in, and I'm going, Terminator, he was the Skynet guy. Like I'm saying it out loud like I'm there being helpful. And it's an engaging show, so I really love that. That's what y'all do. And like I said, it's that part of me that I get to live vicariously through your show, because I would love to do movies and TV shows, because I consume more than Star Wars. I love Star Wars. I watch, I could do a whole thing about 30 Rock. I could do a whole thing about The Office or Parks and Rec. Like I could go on all these other channels, but there's not enough time and podcasting hours in the day for me to do that.
Right. And it's funny. It's funny you mentioned that. I mean, because part of the pandemic thing that occurred, we kind of got into the YouTube game also. And we do a show called the Deucecast Extra, which is more TV based. So it's just about the most recent episode of whatever show. Like Dr. Earl and I did Yellowstone, because that is a dude soap opera.
It's such a good show.
It is awesome. And so we found ourselves just wanting to spend 30 minutes after we watched the episode talking about it. And we had never really dipped our toe into the YouTube game. That's just not something that we took the time to do. But one of the things that just happened with the pandemic, I mean, you just find extra time to do stuff like that.
Absolutely.
And so we do that every Monday night for whatever show. Like, of course, like everybody else in the world, we're watching The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So
Oh my
we
God.
we do a show talking about that. So
and that's what I love too. And again, there's more than I can get to.
Right.
Whether it's new stuff like Falcon and Winter Soldier, WandaVision, I haven't figured out. I don't think I have an angle yet, but Bad Batch is coming out soon, and there's a part of me that wants to talk about that. But there's others that are going to do it, and I'm probably just going to listen to them.
Well,
yeah. But I could go back to, I always go with like the Mount Rushmore proposition. What is my Mount Rushmore of TV shows?
Yeah,
what are the four if I had
that,
yeah. And so like I would do a Sopranos deep dive in a heartbeat.
Nice.
I would do a Deadwood deep dive in a heartbeat. My all-time favorite TV show is The West Wing. And they've done that. West Wing Weekly. It's one of the best podcasts I've ever listened to with, Josh Molina and Rishi from Sound. I forget. Anyhow, phenomenal podcaster. Song Exploder. That's what it is. Song Exploder.
Oh yeah.
But that one was so good. Right now, I'm listening to Talking Sopranos with Michael Imperioli and the guy that played Bobby from The Sopranos, and that's fun because they were there. The Office Ladies.
Yeah.
Some of those, because I love those shows, and I'm such a sucker for behind the scenes. How did they make it? Process stories. What are the fun stories from the set about? I mean, that guy that played Bobby in The Sopranos played college basketball at like Brooklyn City College or somewhere. And I'm going, I would have, they have that one scene where he's playing basketball with Joey Pants and, whatever. But like at the same time, you're going, that wasn't him. That was him and Vito. That's a different one. But I'm going, he doesn't look like a basketball player, but he also had to wear a fat suit in The Sopranos. And they did a good job of kind of selling that.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
So I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. And there's that part of me that goes, I want to do my own version of that, but I shouldn't because somebody else is already doing it.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I mean, with podcasting, you always, what was the first show you listened to, right? I mean, you always think about that and like what made you fall in love with the medium, right? And I watched, or I would watch the Lost like everybody else. And I found this random podcast called Jay and Jack Lost Podcast or whatever, and they would just break down every episode. And so that was kind of like my first podcast. And then, everybody at that time, the first Star Wars podcast I listened to was the Force Cast. I mean, it was just kind of, it's just kind of what happened back then. I mean, podcasting was so new. There really wasn't that many people. And then 5 years
how that changed.
Yeah, 5 years in, it's a flood. I mean, you can find anything and everything. You can probably find a basket podcast.
Oh, no doubt. And I love, just like I love a good documentary, I love a good documentary style podcast where, did you listen to the Winds of Change podcast?
No, I mean, and Dave is probably, if he's watching or going to watch this later, he's laughing. I mean, he knows I'm not a documentary guy. And so I don't really listen to many of those. Now, my wife, on the other hand, she loves all the real crime stuff.
And my wife loves that stuff too.
Oh,
and so
man.
we watch a lot of documentaries together. I draw the line a lot of times at like the true crime, cold case, whatever.
Yeah.
But there are so many things that when they're done in a good documentary style, it doesn't matter what it is. Like Hero Dreams of Sushi.
No,
it's about a dude making sushi in a Subway in Japan where 6 people can go and eat. And it's one of the craziest. It's one of the best documentaries I've ever seen.
Now, have you heard of the documentary that will just emotionally wreck you before called Dear Zachary?
No.
If you want to be emotionally wrecked and probably ruined for about a year, watch that documentary. I mean,
I'm gonna have to save that for a special occasion.
But it is really well done, and it's like a great documentary. But the subject matter will so look it up later. Dear Zachary,
absolutely. Well, and that's what I was going to say. There are so many things that are so good, like that Winds of Change podcast is about the Scorpion song "Wind of Change" that was popular in the '80s.
That's awesome.
And how was that a propaganda mechanism during the Cold War and in the early 80s? Like, it's fascinating. Like, were the guys in the Scorpions some sort of like sleeper agent, CIA? Like, was it written? It's really, it's something. It's wild. It's one of the, and so again, there's so much of that. But for me, like you said, with podcasting, what were the first ones? What were the first, something I I started in college listening to the Tony Kornheiser radio show.
Oh, nice. Yep.
Tony Kornheiser from PTI when he was still on ESPN radio. He came on after Dan Patrick. And Tony Kornheiser has always been one of my spirit animals. He's a grouchy old man. He's sarcastic. He's funny. He always says, what works on his show is smart and funny. That's where I tend to check in and get, if a show is smart and funny, I'm there. I'm in for it.
I love that.
And so I started listening to that in college, and he would go through different iterations. Or when he left ESPN radio, he went to, something localized in Washington, D.C., where he lives, but you could stream it, on the internet. Yeah. And at that point, it was a stream. It wasn't a podcast. And then some point it became a podcast. So I've been listening to that for 20 plus years now. And then that slowly opened up the doors to, how did this get made? Or, which is one of my all-time favorites. But then the first Star Wars podcast I found was Star Wars Minute.
Oh, yeah. That's a popular one.
Pete and Alex, those guys. Yeah. Loved that show. Alex was actually on here a couple weeks ago, and that was a big deal for me because I was like, cool. You're the first you got me into this.
That's great.
But I also, and I said this to him, I had that moment of, I discovered that when I listened to it for a while. I loved the concept of it. And then at some point it occurred to me, I bet there's other Star Wars podcasts. Little did I know.
Did you know.
Went and searched. There's, 76,000, and I'm just one of them.
Right.
But I love the medium. I love the format. I truly love music. I've been a musician a lot of my life.
Oh, cool.
And I don't nearly listen to music the way I used to because all my time is consumed with podcasts. And I have too many. Yeah. And, whether it's politics, current events, sports, entertainment, whatever it is. Steve was talking about when he was on at the beginning, he's into the High Republic books. And he always gives me a hard time because I love to read, but I don't ever take the time and choose to read. Like at night, I watch a show or a movie on my iPad because it's the path of least resistance. I don't have to have a light on. I can put a headphone in. I don't bother people. He's like, we need to do, Audible and audiobooks. I'm like, you're right. But I also have all these podcasts that I can't keep up with. So I just don't prioritize it the right way.
Yeah.
But it's such a fun medium. And what you guys do is so fun. And like I said, I'm jealous because I love Star Wars and I love kind of staying, trying to do the one thing I really know really well. But I have these moments where I'm like, I need to tell somebody about this, the episode of Winter Soldier that was on 2 days ago, or, all that kind of stuff. So it's really great. And again, 10 years, like that's really a big deal.
Yeah. I mean, we keep hearing people telling us that, and it's really, like I said, I mean, I wouldn't want to be doing it with anybody else. I love these guys that I do it with. And I think that's why I keep doing it, because I love them like they're my brothers.
Absolutely.
And so it just makes it easy to find the time to do it when all of our spouses would probably really rather us be doing something else. And then you add kids to that mix, and you find less and less time to do the stuff. But I think it's just it's been important to me over these 10 years to make this a priority and continue that, because we obviously don't get to see each other that much anymore. And so doing the Zoom thing has been weird for us, because at least before we would get to hang out in the same room and do the podcast. But it's still been fun. I mean, it's been a fun 10 years where it's weird because we hit the 10-year mark, but then also another big deal that we're hitting this year in September is going to be episode 500. That's kind of like a bigger deal in the podcasting world, not necessarily how long you've been doing it, but how many episodes. And so we're really excited, and that's going to be the big blow up episode. The 10 years we celebrated, but the 500th episode, and I joke with David, I was like, once we hit 500, I'm done.
That's it. I'm hitting 500, taking it, and I'm going home.
That's right.
I love that. Well, as we talk about movies, and before we transition to our top 7 list, because we do have a fun top 7 list ahead, because you're a movie guy, and I went back and I downloaded back in December, actually, I don't know, maybe it was the day after, but the Disney earnings call, the big Disney earnings call that stopped the world.
Yeah.
That was on December to the 10th. I know that because that's my wedding anniversary. I was in the kitchen cooking dinner, live streaming it on my phone, and getting irritated every time they did those little cutaways to the video footage they weren't going to show the people not in the room. But that was a big deal, and that gave us a lot of content and a lot of things to look forward to. So as a movie guy, and it doesn't have to be a movie thing, but out of all the Star Wars stuff that they talked about in that, what were the couple of things that really, you were really excited about and really are looking forward to?
Well, I mean, I think the dude right now, and really over the last 10 years, that knows Star Wars better than anybody and loves Star Wars more than anyone because he gets to make it, is Dave Filoni. And so
Absolutely.
you tag his name on something and I'm there. I don't care what it is. So I'm super excited about the future. The Ahsoka show, which, gosh, Ahsoka's, and I don't want to go down on too long of a rabbit trail.
That's all right. We're good to go.
when you go to the theater and you see a movie like the Clone Wars animated movie, and you're sort of like, that was the worst. That wasn't that great. that Padawan's kind of annoying. And I have grown to love that character. It's not my like Han Solo is still my boy. Han Solo will always still be my boy. But Ahsoka is up there, at least in my top 5 Star Wars characters of all time. I mean, it's a character that I absolutely love, and I know Rhett probably right now is retching because he's not a huge fan of anything that's animated. But that character, I've got Ashley Eckstein's autograph. I mean, it's just one of those characters that I just ended up falling in love with. Now, a lot of it did have to do with Ashley, and I'm excited that Rosario Dawson's doing it, but I really would have loved to have seen Ashley get to do the live action, but I get it. I understand why that can't happen. But so I'm super excited about that show just because it's going to be, I mean, in my opinion, it's going to be the search for Ezra Bridger and Thrawn, you know, that type of thing. And so,
and if I can say, I agree with you 100%, and I'm exactly on the same page, not only about Han Solo, but Ahsoka might well be edging into my Mount Rushmore of Star Wars characters. And honestly, I'm exactly the same way you are. I was old enough that when even the Clone Wars animated series came out, it wasn't really my thing. Like, I knew it existed. I kind of didn't care. I didn't really pay that much attention to it. And that changed actually when Rebels came out. And Rebels, for me, and I say this probably on a weekly basis, Rebels is some of the best Star Wars storytelling in the Disney era. I mean, it's way, way up there. Like, I love Rebels. And a lot of my love for Ahsoka came from her role in Rebels as Fulcrum, the thing, you know, that World Between Worlds arc, the battle that she has with Darth Vader in that temple. And what it did for me is it caused me to then go back to the Clone Wars to kind of flesh that character out, flesh out other things like the Darksaber, Mortis. You know, I always say that Clone Wars for me became like a reference book. When something happened on Rebels, I was like, oh, I need to go find that in Clone Wars and figure out what all that is, you know, backstory wise. But that character of Ahsoka, and again, for as much as I didn't care about the Clone Wars, like this last series that they did to wrap it all up, and her arc and the thing with Maul, and you know, it really was powerful. And in fact, one of my favorite parts is that ending part. It's her and Rex, and you know, that scene at the very end with the helmet in the snow and the reflection of Vader and the lightsaber and that whole thing. I've
got to tell you that was one of the most cinematic things that I have seen Filoni like ever do. I mean, the music alone harkened back to stuff like Vangelis, like Blade Runner-esque. Yeah, that's an idiot. No, but but dude, that last moment, just so good. I mean, I'm like thoroughly impressed with everything that Dave Filoni has ever done. And I'm just, we are all so lucky that he has dipped his toe into live action and is moving into that realm.
Well, and him and Favreau as a combo, I mean, that's something else because, you know, Favreau's that guy that like, oh yeah, he was the swingers guy. Oh yeah, he was the doctor and elf. Oh yeah. And all of a sudden you look up and you're like, he might well be our generation's George Lucas. Like the technology, the storytelling, the ability to, but maybe even better than George, because, you know, George would have some of those limits with dialogue and character, you know, some of those faults that you always hear, you know, it has to be more than just faster and more intense. Like it has to be, you know, something else. And so to get, you know, that dream team of Favreau and Filoni, you know, like you said, anything they do, I'm in for.
Yeah. And I think what's different between Lucas and Favreau, I think Favreau understands and relishes the collaboration aspect of things.
Yes.
Maybe a little bit more than George did. You know, George, some of his earlier, he was a little bit precious with some of his stuff, but Favreau knows who he wants to work with, and hired some of the really best directors for that first season of Mandalorian on into the second season. So he's and then he knew immediately Filoni's a guy I want to almost mentor in a way. I know those guys are probably around the same age,
sure,
but he's still mentoring him in a way, bringing him into that live action world. And knowing that that Filoni has a wealth of knowledge that Favreau needs.
And that's the thing. I think that's such a key point is Filoni was literally the guy that sat at George Lucas's feet. And if there's anybody that understands it as well or better than George Lucas, it's Dave Filoni.
Yeah.
And, I love hearing Filoni tell the story about how he got that job and how George is just kind of checked out and doesn't really care. And he asks him some question. He's like, no, that's the right answer. If George Lucas tells you got it right, that's a big deal. But to have that pedigree, to have that depth of knowledge. And like you said, that's such a great point about Favreau and the collaborations piece, because 3 years ago, if somebody had told you, all right, there's going to be a new Star Wars thing, and it's going to be Ron Howard's kid, Robert Rodriguez, Carl Weathers, like, these are going to be the people that direct it. You're like, what are you on? And what are you talking about? And every episode, the action in that Robert Rodriguez episode, Boba Fett, and
so good.
We've not gotten that kind of Star Wars, but it did for me. What I've heard other people talk about is I wasn't a Boba Fett obsessive. Like growing up, I was like, he's kind of cool. He's got a helmet, but he kind of died in a punk way because he got his jetpack hit.
Exactly.
And he was supposed to be the baddest bounty hunter in the galaxy. Well, now we know why, because of what Robert Rodriguez did working with Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni to make that episode. And you're like, oh, snap. This is the Boba Fett we heard about. And, I'm not obsessed, but I've come around on Boba Fett more than I had before.
Definitely.
So I think that's a big deal. So anything Favreau and Filoni you're excited about, that's obviously an easy one. Is there anything else that came out of that?
Definitely. I think if you're talking about the Disney Plus series, The Acolyte is very intriguing to me. I'm really interested in that. Russian Doll, if you haven't seen that series on Netflix, that's the series Leslie Headland is created that. She's doing The Acolyte. I'm interested in that. Also, I've been keeping up with the High Republic stuff. So, that's only supposed to be a short time after the High Republic. So I'm very interested in that. And then the Taika Waititi movie looks like, gosh, that guy can do no wrong. So I'm very much looking forward to that as well.
That's the one. Of course, I'm looking forward to Kenobi as a person who as a person who struggled with the prequels because I was of that certain age. I've come back around to the prequels, a reformed prequelist, as we like to say.
There you go.
But Ewan McGregor was always the best part of the prequels, his Obi-Wan, especially when you get into 2 and 3. So, of course, I'm excited about that. But my number one thing is this Taika movie. And I don't know what it is. But I will. And the reason is because, and this is the hill that I've chosen to die on, Thor Ragnarok is the best MCU movie there is. And
I won't argue with you.
I will claim that all day long.
Yeah, it's good. I still think Captain America Winter Soldier is probably still the best. But, look, Taika changed the game quite a bit with that Thor Ragnarok. He had a really good balance of humor that character had not really seen much. And I very much look forward to his next Thor movie and what he's going to do with Star Wars. It's good.
Absolutely. And I think the one other, and of course, all of it is to be excited. It's new Star Wars. Like somebody said not too long ago, it's new Star Wars. I'm not going to not be excited. Like bring me on the anime thing. I don't do anime, but I'm going to watch it.
Yeah.
But the other one, and especially because of the personal connection, what's her name from Wonder Woman? I totally blanked.
Gal Gadot or no, Patty Jenkins.
Oh yeah. Patty Jenkins, the Patty Jenkins movie. When she put out that video about her dad being a fighter pilot and how she wanted to do something that was, to honor that was a really good, fighter plane kind of thing. And she had never found it. And she gets the chance to do that in Star Wars. The personal connection in that to me is telling me already that has the potential to be really cool.
Yeah.
And so I love the drive that she has to want to do it that way. Well, speaking of passions, we've talked a bunch about movies. We've talked about, your show and things to be excited about.
Yeah.
But you are obviously a Star Wars fan. You're obviously a Star Wars collector, as you mentioned at the top of the show. And so as we were talking and getting ready for this, I asked you, what is the top 7? What is something that we could count down? And you were like, well, if you haven't done it, I'd love to talk about my top 7 Star Wars collectibles. So that's what we're going to do tonight for our top 7. And this is exciting to me. I'm also a Star Wars collector. It's not obvious by looking at all the stuff piled up behind me. But I love hearing about other people's collections, and I love seeing the things. And of course, I know because you sent me some of the pictures to get ready, but there's stories with collections. And that's the big thing that I love about things that we collect. I grew up and my parents, collected lots of things. The little spoons that everybody's grandmother had when they traveled and went different places. Yeah. There was a huge Beanie Baby thing at my house at some point. All those things happened and there were connections to them. And so we're going to jump right in with your number 7. And awesome. I'm going to get it up here on the screen and I want to hear about it.
Okay. Well,
that's right. Yep.
I mean, this
I
one.
Got it. we have, and for our audio listeners, in case you're not able to catch the live stream,
right?
Number 7 is a Poggle the Lesser figurine with the base on the little Attack of the Clones stand and holder. So please tell us about Poggle the Lesser.
So Poggle the Lesser, that particular character, I think, is one of the most misunderstood characters in the prequel trilogy. That is a character that was trying to just do what was right for his people. And was just misunderstood because of that, and got the short end of the stick. Now, there's also kind of a real world story with Poggle the Lesser that I'll have to point you to Card Trader Illuminati, because it's an emotional story from my childhood. And I think that if you really want to know, you'll go find the episode on Card Trader Illuminati where I talk about the emotional story that has to do with bugs.
Absolutely.
And it's a character, one of the characters that I just sort of picked when we were doing the Topps Star Wars Card Trader app. Everybody had the character that they were going to hoard, right?
Right.
And so that was a character that nobody else at the time had snagged for obvious reasons. So I chose that character, and I've got my name on the back of a Poggle the Lesser card. So that's all. Nice. That's all that one can really want in life, really. Is to have
that's
your name
right. That's the big time
on the back of the Poggle the Lesser card. But yeah. So
keeping with the
shout out to those people.
That's right. Well, keeping with the theme, Rhett said his favorite collectible is his life-size, anatomically correct Tan Wee figure. So.
You don't have to put his stuff up.
I feel like I like watching his comments make you squirm just a little bit, and that's a problem on my side. So
they do. I die inside every time I see him type something. But yeah, so that's there's a lot of fun stuff with Poggle the Lesser on Card Trader Illuminati. But it is a character, in all honesty, that I think was really treated poorly and misunderstood quite a bit.
Absolutely. Well, in that whole, as we see and we talk about the prequels, we had all this discussion about trade federations and trade agreements and the government heavy side of it. And we just didn't take the time to understand because we just wanted to see people laser sword one another. So
exactly.
That's all we were really there for. So excellent start to the list. Well, as we transition into number 6, we have the Bantha and the Tusken Raider.
Okay. So this one, I fell into an obsession with these itty bitties.
Okay.
I've never been really a dude that obviously had a bunch of like dolls around, but I don't know what it was about these. I wasn't very much into the Funko Pops.
Right.
And so this sort of took over the Funko Pop obsession that everybody seems to have. Now this one is the first con exclusive, and now when I say convention exclusive, I mean that's a thing. Like if you go to these Star Wars conventions, there's always these exclusives that a bunch of different companies will have an exclusive. So this was the first one that Hallmark did, and it was sort of like my white whale. It was one that I figured I would never get. I wasn't certainly going to pay what the price it was on eBay, and out of nowhere on my 40th birthday, a guy that I've known since I was 16, 17, Tommy, who I've mentioned a little bit earlier, that did the Card Trader Illuminati podcast, and he helped produce the Deuce Cast for a long time. He shows up to this restaurant that we're at with this thing, and I literally I start crying almost. I mean, you know, it was a big deal, like, for a collector to get something they never thought they would get. I mean, from just like a whale standpoint, and to come from a friend. I mean, you know, it's like I said, these guys that I've grown up with, and just that I and he's probably the one I've known the longest out of all my friend groups.
Absolutely,
is Tommy. Known him since high school, and you know, if I was ever in a situation where I had to push him out of the way of a car, I probably would. I mean, these are guys I love. I mean, it's just, you know, we give each other a really hard time, and we pick on each other a lot, just like friends do. And Star Wars has brought us together, and this was just, he knew that I wasn't going to go get it myself, and so he went out, and I never asked him how he got it, what he did to get it. I didn't really want to know, because I didn't want to know that he spent a lot of money on me.
Sure.
But it's pretty awesome. And if I can show the bottom of it.
Yeah.
This was I don't know, it's hard to see on the screen. A lot of the con exclusives, it's not going to show up, bro. But this actually has a patch on the bottom that says 2014 Comic Convention exclusive. They stopped doing that. This is the only one that kind of has that like patch on the bottom of it. So it's kind of a big deal to have that particular one. So
that's awesome. Well, it makes me think. No, that's great, and it makes me think of two things. I love how you said you didn't go down the Funko Pop road. I have a couple, but that's not one of my things. I know lots of people who have fell down what we like to call the funk hole. You know, and then you have to arrange them properly. So then you have an issue with feng shui. Like, it becomes this whole deal. So that was never one that I fell down, but I did hear, excuse me, I think it was Alice and Laura on the Force Toast podcast. They one time referred to Funko Pops as precious moments for nerds.
That's a good one.
I fell out of my chair when I heard that, because
that is awesome. Yeah. I mean, if I tilted my camera, I've got all of these things. I've got I have all of them now, and it's a sickness. It's the only thing that I have gone completely overboard with. I usually, like, I've got all of the Black Series Mandalorian figures.
Okay.
But I've limited it to that. Like, I've said, I'm only going to get now that's gotten ridiculous, but I'm only going to get the Mandalorian Black Series figures. And I've got all of the Macquarie figures that they did a couple years ago. I've got all of those. So it's very limited. Like, I never went crazy with the figures or anything, but these stupid itty bitties, man, I'm obsessed with them for some reason.
Well, and I get that. And that's tough as a collector, because there are certain modes where, like, you know, you want to be a completionist. Like, you find a certain thing, you're like, I have to have all those things.
Yeah.
And it's very easy, because there are so many things, to overextend yourself. Try, you know, whether you have space, whether you have the money, whatever it is. I know people who, you know, they're completionists for Black Series, and they want to see every one of those numbers from one, you know,
I can't
and that's awesome.
Yeah.
You know, I was telling somebody just the other day, Black Series and vintage collection, that's fine, but those aren't for me. The sculpts on those are a little weird for me. Like, if it's not a helmeted character or certain aliens, like, I think they're kind of weird.
Yeah.
What I do love, and what I'm working on still right now, is getting a complete, you know, vintage run of figures. And I've got a long way to go, you know, to get all those. But I will say, of the modern stuff, the one that I am down for to be a completionist is the retro collection that they started a couple years ago.
Yeah, those are great.
Because there's usually only 6 or 7.
Right.
The 7th one is usually the exclusive in, like, a board game.
Yeah.
And so I've got, you know, I think I'm short 2 of the ones that are out so far. There's a Mandalorian line of those that are supposed to come out, I think, this summer. And then the next thing will be which ones did they select for the Return of the Jedi line. Yeah. So those are, again, there's 6 of them. It's an easier thing to go, yeah, I can get all of those and not feel like I have to build a wing on my house or whatever it is. And I want to hit this too. You mentioned at the top of the show, and with these being con exclusives, you've been to Celebration before.
Yeah, I've been to a lot.
Which
of them,
celebration have you been to? Sweet.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then at one point they stopped with that. They just started calling them, like, I've been to the 2 that were in Orlando.
Okay.
So the only 2 that I've missed in the United States was Anaheim, the first one, because for some reason we decided to have a kid. I don't know why. So I had to miss that year. And then Chicago I did not go to either.
Okay.
But I have full intention of going to 2022.
That's awesome.
I'm planning on going to Anaheim. There have been some amazing moments. One of my favorites that I actually got, not published or whatever, but I sent in an email to the guys at Star Wars Insider, and they put me in their magazine, was Celebration Los Angeles. So this was right after J.J. Abrams had directed MI3, and he was getting ready to do Star Trek, I think. I snagged a picture with him. He was just walking the con floor with his kids, and I snagged a picture with him, and that's like one of my crowning achievements at those things. And I'm not the autograph guy, but I've got Filoni's autograph. I've got Ashley Eckstein's autograph. And the Filoni one was fun because I just stuck out like the pamphlet and said, "Hey, can you?" This was before anybody knew who the guy was. Right. This was like Celebration 3 or 4. I handed it to him and he just signed it. He's not behind, like, now you couldn't get near the guy.
Right. Yeah.
And it's cool because he doodled a little clone trooper on it and then signed his name. So
that's really awesome.
It's just little things like that, and that's why you never skip those things, because you just never, and why I was so bummed to miss the first one in Anaheim and the one in Chicago, because you just never know what's going to happen. And now, like you had mentioned earlier, I want to meet some of these people that I've interacted with online, on the online community. Absolutely. Our podcast is part of a really great podcast network called RetroZap. That Joe Tavano sort of started several years ago, and that was one of the most fun things that we did in Orlando, was those podcast meetups. I had such a blast with those podcast meetups, and I don't even host a Star Wars podcast, but I got to meet all these.
But it didn't matter.
That's right. So it was fun.
That's awesome. Well, and so do you have tickets for Anaheim?
I don't yet. No, I'm going to buy them whenever they're going. I didn't buy them, the first time, right? Yeah, the first time. So I'll buy them. Yeah. And I've coupled it with a trip with the family to go to Disneyland or whatever. Nice. And so as long as I can sell my wife on, because she's a Disney file, she's obsessed with Disney.
That's right.
So as long as I can, couple it with a Disney trip, she's going to let
everybody wins.
Yeah. So
I hear you. Well, and I've told this story too many times, but I'll tell it to you real quick. I went to Celebration Orlando in 2017.
Nice. That was a good one.
A good buddy of mine. We went down for the day. We were there on Thursday, so we left Montgomery on Wednesday. Drove, spent the night, and we were just there for the one day. Boy, was I not prepared for everything that I got to see.
That's awesome.
And we didn't do panels. Like, we were, it was mostly convention floor.
Yeah.
They had the big middle stage. My favorite, I think my favorite moment from that was that I was there and in the crowd when Billy Lord came out and did the Carrie monologue right after Carrie had died.
Nice.
On stage. That was such a cool connecting, kind of moment. But as we drove home, all we could talk about was how unprepared we were for, like, it has to be multiple day next time. It has to be, just all of it. So I didn't have tickets either originally when, when I guess this last year was going to be, 2020 was going to be. And so now, like, I'm anxiously, eagerly watching for when news is going to come of when they will go back on sale. And if any way possible, I can make it happen. Like, I'll sleep standing up in somebody's car. Like, I'll do what I have to go. And again, even if not for the Star Wars part, to connect with these people that I've met, over this last year. So that's really awesome.
That's what those things are all about. I mean, there's definitely really fun. And I'll tell a little story about, because I've got one of those con exclusives. But I mean, one of my favorite moments that didn't have to do with, necessarily what I was watching or whatever, was I was with my dad and my father-in-law. And we did the drive down for the day thing too, for one of those Orlando things. We weren't going to stay the whole time, but we went to a Filoni panel, and just out of nowhere, Lucas walks out and the place erupts. I mean, it is absolutely insane. And just being there with my dad, and my father-in-law at the same time, getting to experience that moment with them, I will never forget it for the rest of my life. I mean, it's just it's one of those things. I'm not going to get to do that kind of stuff with my dad again. He's not healthy. He's not doing well health wise. So it's those moments that I try and like hold tight, because that is what Star Wars is about. Sorry.
Absolutely. No. Absolutely. Well, as we transition, as we keep talking about collections, because you're right, it is about power. It's about connection. And that's what these, the collectibles connect to, whether it's something that a family member gave you, a friend gave you, like you said, this was powerful.
Oh yeah.
Because it was from a friend and it was unexpected. And those are the ones that catch you even more, in that moment. So as we move on to the next one, we have something that hits me in a sweet spot is Ralph McQuarrie art.
This one's a humble brag, really, is all this one is. I mean, because that is his signature. That is actually Ralph McQuarrie's signature. Now you can tell it's close to when he was not doing well, because the signature's sort of shaky or whatever. But I picked that up at one of the celebrations, and I mean, without like Lucas, Williams, and McQuarrie, there would not be Star Wars. I mean, I'm thoroughly convinced that the stars aligned for those three guys to work on Star Wars together, and the ability that McQuarrie had to put Lucas's vision into some of the concept art and whatnot. And there's of course a ton of other people involved. Like you can throw out Joe Johnston's name and Dennis Muir and Bert, all those guys. But I mean, those three, that trifecta right there, just is so important to Star Wars. And I want every Star Wars fan not to forget McQuarrie's name. Like all these youngins coming into Star Wars, they need to know about McQuarrie. Doug Chang is fantastic as well.
Yes,
but Doug Chang will tell you McQuarrie is why he got into that business. I mean,
that's absolutely right.
And so that's it was a humble brag, really. That's why.
And as well it should be. And I've got, you can see two of them on camera. I've got over my shoulder. I found last October at a local thrift store here in town, which usually we don't have great thrift stores and I don't ever find anything. I found the packet of these and it's only missing, I think, 2. It's got 19 of the 21 prints that were inside of it. Of course, one of the ones that's missing is the classic Luke and Vader face off in the hallway. And I haven't figured out what the other one is yet. I need to get back on that. But I'm such a sucker for concept art, and I'm such a sucker for Ralph McQuarrie and this kind of, again, process story. And that was another one of the things that I loved so much about Rebels is so much of the art in Rebels is McQuarrie inspired, whether it's the buildings on Lothal, whether it's the troopers being that longer, leaner, taller, like the Death Troopers were. And then you have, my favorite nod is Zeb, who is concept art Chewbacca. Like, that's one of those things that I'm going, it's still there. It still lives. But to me, these are art. And like when I brought this home and I showed it to my wife, and of course I was so excited because I got this whole thing for $15.
That's awesome.
And I brought it home and she's like, what is this? And I started showing it to her. And it was one of those rare moments where she was like, those aren't so bad. Like, I don't want you to put them in the living room, but like they might look nice framed and put somewhere. So 4 of them are out in the garage with me. But I love that. And when you sent me, these pictures of the stuff you had, I immediately keyed in on this one, especially because I love Ralph McQuarrie and I love this kind of art.
Awesome.
So that's an excellent one. And as we move on to the next one, we have Han and Leia charcoal art. Tell us about that. Man.
So this one, I commissioned this from a local artist. Her name's Dan Franklin up here in Birmingham. And I think that's another cool side of Star Wars that a lot of people don't think about is just, your local artist or even your artists that are doing these type of things for a living, even like the comic book artists that will, do those blank cover pages for you and then fill them, draw whatever you want to. So I actually thought she was fantastic when I saw her stuff, and I commissioned this particular piece because Han Solo is my favorite character. Carrie Fisher is near and dear to my heart also. And just Dan is she is just super talented. I'll point you the easiest way to find her stuff and look at her stuff because she does a lot of pop culture stuff also outside of Star Wars. If you go to Instagram and just look up the hashtag no bounds. So the no
Okay.
no and then bounds.
Okay.
Now I'll preface it with saying that she does some out there stuff, like in the horror genre.
Sure.
But she is one of the most talented artists, and she happens to be here in Birmingham. And I had that. This is the first and only piece of art I have ever commissioned in my life.
That's fantastic.
And so I just think it's like she's such a pro. And I mean, and it's cool. It's on a piece of, I know it's hard to tell in the picture, but I mean, it's on a piece of wood.
Right.
And
okay. Hang on.
It's really cool looking. Just, it's just these little, and she puts this stuff over the top of it to keep it preserved or whatever. But I just thought she was super talented, and I'm no guy that collects art or whatever, but I was like, I've got to get her to do.
Got to have that.
For me.
That's really cool, and that reminds me of when we were at Celebration in Orlando that year. And I follow the guy on Instagram, and I could still buy it online if I wanted to. But there's something about the chase and getting it in person, at an event. I can't remember what his name is now, but he had pages from the original like Star Wars novels that he had bought them at bookstores or whatever, and he had drawn. Like there's one that has like Lando drawn on it that my buddy Chad that I went with, he bought one of those. There was one that, again, it's just a page from like original New Hope book, and it's got R2 drawn on it, or his art on a book page that would, they're small, they're not huge, but I'm going, that's that kind of stuff that's just unique and neat. And again, it's individualized art, which I think is really cool. So I am also not a refined art person, but like it's that kind of thing. Like when you see it and it's good, you just know. You're like, I need
mean,
that,
and that's what it was. I met her in person. I looked at her stuff. There's a Magic City Art Connection type thing here in Birmingham that a lot of cities have something like that. And I saw her stuff, and she had a couple Star Wars things. And I was like, man, she's just so talented. Like, why is she not working for somebody doing this for like starving artist type thing is a real thing, by the way. That is, but she's so talented. And I was like, you know what? I don't care how much she's going to charge me. I want to have this particular shot of Han and Leia on charcoal on a piece of freaking wood, because it looks awesome.
No, it's definitely awesome. And it was an excellent choice. Let's see what we have next. I don't remember all these in order. Oh, this is a great one.
Oh yeah. This one
is a great one.
It was the first celebration I'd been to, and it was kind of the wild, wild west, really. I mean, this was when Wizards of the Coast was doing them. And so with Indianapolis, of course, from Birmingham, that's not that big of a drive. I mean, so it was kind of a no-brainer that me and my buddies went up there for the first two. Well, no, it was the second and the third one. The first one was Mudfest in Denver, or whatever, where everybody that's ever gone to that one talked about how it's the most muddy because it was outdoors in a tent and it was like super muddy. But upon research, I mean, Hasbro actually did not have a figure at that first one. So this was the first Hasbro con exclusive. It's George Lucas basically is what it is as an X-Wing pilot.
Then I was just going to say, for the audio listeners, this is the Jorg Sakul figure from Celebration 2, Celebration exclusive. George Lucas as an X-Wing pilot, and you've got George, and then it comes with one of the little mini X-Wings, almost like the Hot Wheels ones, but smaller than that one. Yeah,
like Micro Machines almost. That just dated me, but like Micro Machines.
Totally.
But at that second one, they had, like, Wizards of the Coast did not know what to expect, obviously, because it was a madhouse. Like, there were so many people there, and you literally had to take a day, like, to stand in line to get the figure. Like, they had no well-oiled machine. I had to take the whole, and I think I went ahead and took the Thursday or whatever, the first day of the con. I literally stood in the line the whole day for this thing. I got one for myself, one for my father-in-law, and then one of my buddies got one also, and it took forever. I mean, and it's coveted because I just remember having to stand in line all day for it. Now they've got it down to a science where you really don't have to do much of that anymore. But this has just got that story behind it, and
it's a great one. Oh, it's a great one, and it's one that is on that list. It's probably not really a short list, but it's that thing that sometimes when I'm late night scrolling eBay and I'm like, I wonder what these are right now. What are these going for right now? And like, I keep watching and I haven't pulled the trigger yet, but one day it's one of those ones that I feel like I need, again, because of the unique nature of what it is and, you know, where it came from and all of that. So that's fantastic. Well, we also have next, and this one, I can't wait to hear about, the Return of the Jedi scissors.
I mean, so like I said, I grew up mostly overseas, and you couldn't find the stuff. I mean, you couldn't find the Kenner figures over there. So this is literally the first piece of Star Wars anything that I got. So this is from '83. It's a pair of scissors. It's near and dear to my heart, not because of what it is necessarily, but because it's literally the first thing that I ever got Star Wars.
That's fantastic.
And I have managed, and thanks to my mom, she knew how much I love. So she managed to like save this and make sure it didn't. I mean, and they're not in great shape, but it's just one of those things that if you can still have the first thing that you ever got Star Wars, then you know that would be
awesome. Huge. Yeah, I don't have any of my original stuff, and again, it's a little pair of red scissors. It's got the little the lenticular sticker in the middle of it, and it looks like it's Darth Vader.
It's a little hologram.
The hologram, and it's Darth
impossible
Vader
to see it because it's just so. But yeah, it's the Imperial shuttle. And then Vader. But yeah, I mean, I've managed to keep those things, and I love it. I mean, I'm gonna tell my kids to bury it with me. I mean, I'm gonna be like, look, you don't get this. You put it in the casket. I want to be buried with this.
I get it completely, and I talk about it too much because I'm friends with some guys that do a collectibles show. And, you know, for me, one of those things that I had as a kid growing up was the Han Solo blaster, that Kenner, you know, the whatever. And sometime in the course of moving a couple of times when I was in third grade, it got lost. And so I've never had it again. I don't have any of my original stuff from when I was a kid. None of that stuff, you know, survived moves and whatnot. But after that trip home from Celebration to Orlando, one of the first things I did was I went on eBay and I got one. And that's awesome. Again, I'm very patient when it comes to eBay. Like, I won't pay the crazy price just because it's there and I can get it. Like, I'll wait for a deal. So I got this for like $15. No promise whether it worked or not. That's awesome. And I'll be danged if I didn't put batteries in it. And it still makes the horrible noise that doesn't sound like a blaster.
Well, I'm sad to say that these scissors don't cut paper anymore.
But they don't need to. They've served their purpose and they get to retire in peace. So that is an excellent one, and I love that personal connection to it.
Yeah.
Oh, now we're at number one, and number one for anybody who's listening on the audio version. Michael told me, he said, "I'm going to send you these 6 pictures of these 6." He said, and then number one, it's kind of a mystery. He said, "I'll be able to talk about it. We'll talk about it on the show." So I don't have a picture up, and for everybody that's watching, that was not an accident. So tell us about your number one thing in your collectibles.
Well, I mean, the number one thing on my collection, it's more of a personal thing. It's not like the great, big, huge, massive, you know, it's not the rocket firing Boba Fett, people. I don't have that. But
I'll be honest, I thought it was a full set of Stormtrooper armor. That's what I was thinking.
No, it's not. It's this quilt behind me. So my mom, and I'm going to do my best to get through this, but something that my mom loves and that she does as just her hobby and that she's done forever is quilting. And you know, and it's not fancy or anything, but it's like all my Star Wars t-shirts, because when you're a Star Wars fan, you have like too many t-shirts.
Correct.
So I was like, Mom, if I give you some of my Star Wars t-shirts, can you make me one of your famous quilts that people beg you to make them over the years?
Absolutely.
And she took the time, and it's not an easy process. I mean, she took the time and you know, made this for me out of a lot of my old t-shirts. And it's just near and dear to my heart. I love it. I always will love it. It's something that I have a connection with my mom, and always will. And I love it. It's it's
fantastic.
Cool.
It really is. And just looking at it right there behind you, you've got Star Tour shirt. You know, I love that so much. And it's so neat that you say that. We talked before we came on the air. I was in youth ministry for almost 20 years before I transitioned in my careers. And if there's one thing that you have a lot of in youth ministry, it's t-shirts, because every retreat you do, every event you do, there's t-shirts. And so I did the same thing. And my best friend, he was in youth ministry as well. And he actually managed to hang on to a bunch of his and do the same thing, get a quilt made out of them.
Yeah.
I saved them in bags for years and thought, this really does represent like a phase of my life, a career or whatever. And then at some point I donated them and I got rid of them and I didn't save them and do it. So I do regret that a little bit, but yours is even more personal and powerful because it's your mom. And that's huge. I just, my oldest daughter who loves Star Wars, she loves blankets, and she just texted me from inside the house and said, I need that quilt. That's amazing. Like she loves blankets and stuffed animals and, all these things, but that's such a worthy number one. And I'm so glad that you saved it as the mystery, and it makes a perfect background when you're on a Star Wars podcast.
Exactly.
I mean, talk about, talking about it being exactly the right thing. That really is fantastic. Well, what I normally do as we get to the end of our top 7 list is I usually throw in a couple of bonuses, and they're things that, maybe were on my list that you didn't bring up or didn't talk about. And so I took a couple of pictures to throw up. Awesome. And for tonight's show, it just gives me a chance to brag about my collection a little bit.
There you go.
Not that again, none of these are rocket firing Boba Fett's either. But a couple of things that, are fun to me, things that I don't know, it's not the Han Solo blaster. The first one is the I got to get the screen share back on. The End Cooper beer can. There's a great cut scene from when they were shooting Star Wars: A New Hope, and this exists as a GIF, Jeff, however you say it, on the internet, of Carrie Fisher handing a beer up to Mark Hamill in the X-wing at that scene when they're back in, the temple and whatever, and he grabs the beer. Well, being a beer lover and a beer nerd, I thought, what beer is that? And of course, they were in the UK. And so you can pause it at the right time. You can figure out what it is. And I went and bought one on eBay because somebody else realized the same thing I did, is people are going to be looking for this certain kind of beer. Yeah. It doesn't appear to be quite the tall boy that the one in the video is, but it's close enough. And I'm totally here for it.
I love it.
So to me, this is one of those like very deep cut, very nerdy, like it sits on the shelf next to like my R2D2 stuff. And, if someone came in here, they'd be like, what is that beer can? Like, what is that
pink
deal?
Shorts guy.
Yeah, that's right. This is the pink shorts guy of Star Wars collectibles. So
I love that, dude. That's so awesome.
This is one of my favorites. So the next one that I had is the Troop Transport. I love this toy. I didn't have this toy as a kid, but I wanted it.
Yeah.
And this is the second one that I've had. The first one I had, I gave to my buddy Chad. And there's, these great videos. It's kind of like, if you want to zone out and get real zen for a minute, there are these great videos where these toy guys go in and like restore vintage Star Wars toys.
Yeah.
And this one was so neat because the sound mechanism inside of it is basically like a little teeny tiny record player. And when you hit the buttons on it, it spins it. And actually I've got it right here. I took the time personally to take it apart, figure out how to get it working again.
Nice. Dude.
And so
I've never heard this before. This is awesome.
It's going to repeat at some point, but and you can even the fact that you can hear the crackle in it like it's a record player. It's one of my favorite toys.
Love that so much.
And again, for a toy I didn't have. So then I got a second chance at it, and I got this one. Like I said, went in, cleaned it, followed that video, kept pausing it so I could figure out how to make it work. I need to find the battery cover for it. Those are pretty rare. There were 2 of them, and in fact, Rhett says it was a Sears exclusive, and so there was one that didn't have the sound bit. I think that may have been the UK version, and then there was this one that had the record player and the sound in it. And so not only is it something fun that I didn't have that I always wanted to have, but the personal achievement of like, I brought it back to life. Like I did that. Yeah. Like that just, was fun. I've done that with the vintage X-Wing, the snow speeder. Again, just taking those motors out, and just most of the time you just have to spin it until it starts going again because it locked up.
I love that.
I've got a vintage Falcon, and I haven't gotten the sound working on that one yet. That's still plaguing me a little bit. So this was one of my bonus ones. And then my third bonus one goes to, you talked about Han Solo being your favorite character, and he is definitely my favorite character. But my 1A, 1B to Han Solo is R2-D2. I love R2-D2. He's right up there. But something about these two guys.
I've got them. Yeah, I've got those two. Those
vintage R2 and R5-D4.
Yes.
Yes. I don't have the first 12 R2 yet, where he didn't have anything in his head. This is the sensor scope one from Empire. And then, of course, the Saber one from Jedi is, much harder to get, and know, a higher spend than some of the other ones.
Yep.
And then just something about R5-D4, like he had that one little moment,
so great,
bad motivator, but to see the things that happened with him in the Certain Point of View book, the story that's about him, was such a fun little nod. And then for him to show up in Mandalorian, for them to intentionally say, hey, let's let this be him. Let's do some stuff down the back of the droid where it looks like they never cleaned up after that motivator blew.
Yeah.
And it went bad. So these two guys, again, they're just a couple of small little, vintage action figures, but I just love them so much. They make me happy. It's one of those things that, I just look at it and I get a dumb grin on my face because it's a couple of toy robots.
That's great.
So those are my bonuses, but I have to throw one more thing up here real quick because you talked about Celebration exclusives.
Yeah.
And because we talked about Ralph McQuarrie, I do have the Celebration 4 concept R2 and 3PO.
Yep.
And I did snag this off of eBay a couple years ago, and it wasn't that hard to, it wasn't too spendy, as we like to say.
Yeah.
But it was just one of those ones, as much as I love McQuarrie, as much as I love R2, and again, that's another one. Chopper in Rebels was concept art R2 with the arms out, sticking out of him and that whole deal.
Love it.
We could go on for hours just about collectibles, but we're not going to do that because it's Sunday night. We both have things that we need to do tomorrow. But I can't thank you enough for coming on tonight, for hanging out with us,
fun.
For telling your stories. I think you have some amazing Star Wars connections. I'm just going to go ahead and put it out there for all of your Deucecast co-hosts. You need to let Michael do more Star Wars stuff on the show. In fact, maybe one of your thought exercises needs to be, as you talked about the timing of Lucas and McQuarrie and Williams coming together in just that right time to make this thing. Maybe the next one of your episodes needs to be a thought exercise on where else have you seen that in another movie or genre or series. How close could you get to another version of that? Indy seems too hard because Williams is already involved. Lucas and Spielberg are involved.
Yeah.
But you guys need to let Michael do Star Wars stuff. That's all I'm here to say. Well, as we get ready to wrap up, please tell everybody where they can find you on Twitter. And certainly we want to encourage everybody to go subscribe to the Deucecast. But you're a great follow on Twitter. You're a good person to interact with. Tell everybody where we can find you.
Yeah, I'm at the Michael Nipp on Twitter. It's at the Deucecast on Twitter also. Now, being a movie guy, I hang out quite a bit on a site called Letterboxd. It's a site that kind of lets you log your movie watching experience. With me trying to go through 365 movies this year, it's been nice to have a place to log that and sort of keep track of that. And I'm a stats nerd, so if you go pro on Letterboxd, you get to see all these crazy stats, like how many of this director have you seen? And it goes like through all the way down. How many of this cinematographer's stuff have you seen? And so it's for a stats guy. It's an awesome website if you do the pro version. So you can follow me on Letterboxd. Just look for my name, and I'm on there. And I throw up reviews every once in a while or whatever.
Awesome.
But then retrozap.com is kind of like the home for the Deucecast. That's the channel that we joined about 5 years ago. And we've really enjoyed, being part of that. Again, it's a great community of people. And so we've really enjoyed being a part of that community over at RetroZap. So check us out over there. And then wherever finer podcasts are sold, we're everywhere. I mean, you can find us anywhere. We're on iHeart, we're on Spotify, we're on, of course, Apple. I mean, we're everywhere. So.
Absolutely. Well, that's fantastic. I can't thank you enough for being here tonight. I can't thank everybody enough that hung out in the live chat. Thanks for being with us. Thanks especially to Rhett. Shout out for keeping it interesting. No, Michael says no, but this is my show, so I get to shout out to Rhett. Thanks to everybody else that hung out in the live chat. I would love for you to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We are at WillsPod in all of those places. And I also want to wrap up. I meant to do this up top. I want to send a special shout out to my friend Pete Fletzer. I've got that new logo, this overlay that has the vintage Return of the Jedi feel to it. Pete helped me get all those things created. So thanks to Pete for helping the show look good. And thanks to everybody that has subscribed to us on YouTube. I was kind of making a push for 100 for the very simple fact that I wanted to be able to have our address be youtube.com/podcast of the Wills.
Yep.
Earlier last week, we crossed that line. We're at like 124 right now. Now that we're over 100, I kind of don't care. So keep subscribing. That'd be great. This isn't my job. I'm not going to try and make money doing this, but it's easy to have. It's nice to have an address where I can tell people where to find us. So thanks for subscribing. Thanks for being a part of the Podcast of the Wills family. And until I see you again next week, may the force be with you always.